Funding for this program is provided by the John M. Olin Foundation and the Star Foundation.
Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Our show today, the revolution, or rather the two revolutions of the 1960s. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll marked a youthful revolt against traditional American mores. Those were turbulent times, and some believed that something genuinely new was coming into being. But the counterculture wasn't the only new movement of the time. There was also a counter-counterculture. Straight arrow, well-dressed, and politically conservative. Indeed, it was this counter-counterculture that gave rise to the presidential candidacy in 1964 of Barry Goldwater, which in turn helped to launch the political career of Ronald Reagan. With us today, two guests. Christopher Hitchens, a contributing editor of Vanity Fair magazine, is a self-proclaimed radical. William F. Buckley, Jr., editor-at-large of National Review magazine, is one of the most noted conservatives in the country. During the 1960s, Hitchens enjoyed the counterculture, whereas Buckley was one of the founders of the politically conservative counter-counterculture. 30 years later, and Hitchens and Buckley are still wrangling over the revolution. Christopher, you write on the year 1968 in Vanity Fair. In my cohort, your cohort, in my cohort, sex, yes. Rock and roll, by all means. Drugs, no. Why not drugs?
Well, there were two reasons. One, in my cohort, we were slightly counter-hedonistic. We thought this was self-indulgence.
This is the Trotskyite cohort?
Yes, the political hardliners. We didn't grow our hair long either. I think that was under probably the illusion.
Was that self-imposed discipline, or was that corporate discipline?
Self-imposed and encouraged by the cohort, because I think under the illusion that it would be easier to talk to the working class, I have to admit. If you went down to leaflet the factory gates, if you had hair down your back, it was thought that might put them off.
Did you work on your accent as
I
well?
paraphrase only slightly, no.
You did not work on your accent?
There was no self-abnegation, but there was a feeling that one should look as if one was serious, really. So the other reason was that, because, of course, it made it very much easier for police provocation to occur, because the planting of drugs was something that had happened to almost
I see. All right. So for specific Trotskyite purposes, your cohort said no to drugs, but yes to sex and rock and roll.
Sex and drugs don't go half as well as some people believe. It's very often you're forced to choose.
I see. All right. But my question is, when you were saying yes to sex and rock and roll, were you thinking thoughts? Was this a kind of conscious rebellion to the established order, or was it just a purely gratification?
No, it was sort of the background music, if you like, to it all. I mean, I remember Sgt. Pepper very well in '67, for example, and it was part of the, as were very, particularly for me at any rate, the early songs of Bob Dylan, part of the background music to it all, part of the theme or mood to the decade, without question, yes.
So it was mood. It was gratification, it was pleasure, it was a big party. You weren't actually thinking ideological thoughts.
I don't think I quite said that, no. I don't think if your background music is Bob Dylan singing The Lonely Death of Hattie Carroll, that's not hedonism.
All right. Bill, you were in your 40s in the 60s when sex, drugs, and rock and roll was breaking out all around you. So far as I can think, it was the most dramatic shift in morals, the most dramatic loosening in morals, if you will, since the English Restoration and even 300 years earlier. As you were experiencing it, what were you able to identify as the causes?
The causes were the widely heralded pursuit of pleasure. It was thought not only of something that you did for natural, organic reasons. The hormones were running around, just as the stomach was running around when you hadn't had anything to eat. But what was missing was those elements that said, look, the fact that one can have sex every day or twice a day for the rest of your life isn't a reason to have it, i.e. there are other factors to take into account. And those factors tend to disappear in a situation in which you are invited, coming through the portals of Woodstock, to simply ask what is the pleasure that you would like between 11 and 11:30. And that answer is given tout court. You don't have to ask any inhibiting questions like, ought I to do it? Ought I to care about the girl? What do I do if the girl gets pregnant?
Part of what's taking place is that the pill is now widely available,
Yes.
so she wouldn't become pregnant if you were exercising minimal
Well, I think that was,
caution.
that was, to coin a phrase, the material precondition for a lot of things.
It was a
Well,
technological breakthrough.
No question about
It's terribly hard to speak simultaneously about the arrival of the pill and the increase of illegitimate babies and the increase in abortions.
Good point. We have a divorce rate of 50% today, illegitimacy rate of 30% or higher, and rising very fast. 1 in 3 pregnancies ends in abortion. Did the 60s do that to us? Fun then, but the party, the
No.
dues of the party may have come in.
I would say, because those figures, which sound a little extreme to me, but I haven't got the means to
those are-
unpack them right with me, but those are what we would callously call underclass figures, basically, aren't they? And these are the people actually over whom, I'm sorry to say, the 60s probably passed without me leaving much
Illegitimacy,
impression. Otherwise,
illegitimacy, yes, but divorce,
the losing classes.
divorce is certainly no. That's certainly up and down the social strata in this country. And abortion, it's hard to get very accurate figures, but it's very high up and down.
I think it's always been hard to get accurate figures on that. I mean, and anyway, many people would
But you won't grant-
date it to the.
You won't grant that there's a price to pay for the...
Oh, by all means, I will. I'm afraid they have to take responsibility for that, as for their abortions. Wouldn't you say? Shouldn't that be the line? People who do these things must take personal responsibility.
You look personal responsibility, yes. But what has personal responsibility got to do with the alarming social trends that emerged during those years?